What if the solution to political violence in America has nothing to do with passing new laws? What if the real problem is something that we can't legislate away? A culture that has no fear of consequences. We've all heard the news and we've seen all the videos about the shooting in Minneapolis between a protester and an ICE officer. Now, I'm not going to review this freaking horrible tragedy just for clicks, okay? I'm not going to analyze the video. I'm not going to slow it down and show various different angles, right, for clicks. And I'm certainly not going to tell you how to feel. I'm just not. This channel doesn't operate that way, right? Instead, what we're going to do today is we're going to review the systemic cause of why these things are happening in America. See, for years, we've been told that the answer is more laws, more enforcement, more control. But the data tells us a completely different story. Political, physical violence in the United States has become more and more lethal in this decade. A steady drumbeat of threats, harassment, and shocking acts of aggression, they've completely created a palpable climate for this type of tension. The United States isn't in a civil war at this moment, but it is marinating in a culture of hostility. This isn't a story about bloodshed in Minneapolis, nor is it a story about government overreach. This is a story about how a culture that normalizes contempt can have an outsized and dangerous impact on society. This is the story of how we lost our fear of consequences.
You're listening to Uncle Sam Saves America, a patriotic show for the average Joe.
When Americans are asked why political violence is increasing, which is a belief that's held by about 85% of the country, they don't point to weak laws, right? What they point to is the culture. They blame the rhetoric of our political leaders. They blame the toxic polarization that has torn the country into various different hostile factions. They blame a mainstream and social media environment that profits from this kind of division. And crucially, 1 in 10 Americans, they bring up the normalization or acceptance of violence as the key driver. They see what's happening, our societal standards, the unwritten rules that once made political violence unthinkable have been eroded away. It's like the immune system of our society, right? It's been weakened and it's losing its ability to fight off the infections of extremism. And this is the core of the issue. While studies show that overwhelmingly Americans still support criminally charging those who commit political violence, it only highlights that there's a bigger disconnect, right? The problem isn't just a lack of formal punishment, it's also the collapse of our informal disapproval. Think of it this way, okay? The law is like a speeding ticket, but the culture is how cool your friends think you are for hot rodding. The speeding ticket, it still exists, it's still there, but your friends have kind of cheered you on and your parents paid for the ticket. So your consequences not only vanished, but they kind of became a reward. And that's a problem in today's society. So how did we get here? How did we build a culture where the fear of financial, legal, and reputational ruin is no longer holding people back? I think it rests on 3 pillars: dehumanization, elite permission, and the inverted reality of an online world. First, we learn to hate, not just to disagree, but to actually despise the other side, right? Political scientists call that affective polarization. It's the shift from I disagree with your policy to you are a bad person. The majority in both parties describe people from the other party as immoral, dishonest, and unintelligent. This isn't just a disagreement. It's moral judgment. They use dehumanizing language, calling people Nazi or fascist as the next step, right? It's a psychological trick that turns down the volume on your conscience, and it recasts fellow citizens as pests that need to be removed and exterminated. It makes violence permissible. Second, our leaders actually give us that permission. Okay, it's kind of like a parent who sees their kids throwing rocks at windows, But instead of telling them to stop, they just let them throw the rocks anyway, right? Now, they haven't explicitly told the child that it's okay to break that window, but they've sent a clear message that the consequences are going to be slim to none. What this is what political elites do when they use violent metaphors or offer wink and nod excuses for the aggression, right? When leaders refuse to unequivocally condemn violence from their own side, they create ambiguity. They are, in effect, erasing the line between right and wrong. And the third pillar of all of this is the engine that powers the other two, right? It's our online ecosystem. Social media has rewired every structure of social consequences. In the past, expressing a violent idea in public would lead to shame. Online, that structure is flipped upside down. Think of it as a marketplace where the only currency is attention, right? Moderation and nuance, they get you nothing. But outrage is a get-rich-quick scheme. The algorithms, they act as brokers, pushing the most inflammatory content to the top because they generate the most traffic, bring in the most ad dollars because they get the most clicks. Extremism gets you likes, it gets you shares, and it builds a status with a curated online tribe. And the consequence for that is extremism has turned into a reward. And so what does this culture of impunity actually look like on the ground? It looks like the normalization of threats and the rise of the vigilante. The Bridging Divides initiative at Princeton has documented a frightening surge in threats against election workers, school board members, public health officers. Each threat is like a single drop of water in a river, right? It seems kind of small, but when you add them together, right, they relentlessly erode the riverbank away. The barrier between angry words and real-world violence is kind of like that. This constant barrage normalizes intimidation as just another part of politics. Until the bank collapses, it's from this swamp that normalized threats and the vigilante begin to emerge. Now, when I say the vigilante, I'm talking about this person who believes that the system has failed and that they must enforce the real law themselves. They see themselves as heroes, main characters in some kind of story written in an online forum, right? The aesthetic of tactical gear and militia cosplay romances their defiance. Outside of their bubble, they face condemnation, but inside their group, they're seen as courageous patriots. This disapproval of the wider public, it's just noise from a corrupt establishment outside, right? And the end result of this is a culture with no fear of consequences. A society where misguided groups feel celebrated for threatening and attacking fellow citizens. It's all because the social structures that once induced a fear of consequences have been replaced by online platforms that manufacture praise. This is a systemic problem, and if we want to solve it, we have to talk about it differently, right? The real call to action here is to start a conversation in your own life. Ask yourself and the people around you, your family, where is the line? At what point does political rhetoric become unacceptable in this community? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. So where do we go from here? If new laws aren't the whole answer, then what is? Right? The solution has to be just as cultural as the problem. It's about rebuilding the societal and political guardrails that we have allowed to decay. Right? The foundation is still there. Most Americans agree, regardless of what party they're in, they still support prosecuting political violence. What's missing is the will to enforce the rules of the game socially and judicially within a weak judicial system. Political and media elites, they're kind of like referees. If they stop calling fouls for one side or the other, the game is going to evolve into chaos, okay? It's going to turn into a hockey ball. They have the profound responsibility to clearly and consistently condemn violence and dehumanizing rhetoric, no matter who it comes from. Not join in on it, not assist it, not add to it, right? No more of this whataboutism, no more winks and nods. It all needs to stop, right? It also means that we need to demand change from the tech platforms, right? The algorithms that reward outrage, those are design choices made by major corporations, not laws of nature, right? If our online world is a marketplace, it's an unregulated marketplace that incentivizes socially destructive behavior. We need to push for a new design, one that reduces the amplification of violent rhetoric and dehumanizing content. But most importantly, this is about rebuilding our collective intolerance for this type of behavior at a community level. It means supporting local law enforcement officials and journalists who are being targeted. It means cooperating with federal law enforcement officials when required. It means refusing to share that viral clip that dehumanizes the other side, even if it feels good for you to do so, okay? It means that we're rewarding moderation with our attention. We're at a critical juncture here in the United States. The constant simmering of rage online and threats against public officials, those aren't random events. They're symptoms of a deeper cultural sickness, right? The erosion of consequences. We've created a world where, for some, consequence for extremism is actually an applause, right? Our sense of shared shame is like the mortar holding the bricks of society together. The law is the blueprint of the house, but the consequences are the binding agents that keeps the walls together, keeps it from crumbling, keeps the society together. Without it, the entire structure is at risk, no matter how good the design is. The choice is plain and simple. We can continue down this path where disputes are settled by violence, or we can consciously decide to build a culture where consequences are once again real. A culture where threatening violence brings consequence, not praise. Anyway, thanks for listening.
You're listening to Uncle Sam Saves America, a patriotic show for the average Joe.